internet, I have come once again. It is I, the Nomad. And Maddie, if she wants to join, is more than welcome to join us. Just hop into Discord and you'll be there. You'll be able to see the stories that I'm going to be covering today. I hope that everyone's doing well, at least better than me. To be quite frank, I am in a bit of pain because of my right shoulder. It's one of the problems when I travel is if I sleep on my in the bed wrong, it inflames the arthritis in my right shoulder tremendously. So I am there. Welcome, Maddie. Welcome. How are you today, Maddie?
I am hanging in there.
I appreciate you coming in, and I will let you take over if you so desire.
I'll
So
just argue with you when appropriate.
argue with me. We don't have that many arguments. Slight disagreements here and there,
Yeah.
but I doubt you'll have too many with me today. Anyway, are we ready for the first story? Do you think? Oh, by the way,
Hmm.
can you see this story?
I think so. It says the stream has ended. Cricket noise.
What?
Yeah, on my end. Hang on, let me see. Close stream. Watch stream. Loading. Please stand by.
You should be able to go to Discord.
There we go. I see it now.
Okay.
It was being discordant.
Oh, that I know very well. Discord does that to me a lot too.
Hmm.
Let's get started, shall we? Kursk map shows Ukraine advance inside of Russia. The evil Vladimir Putin is being attacked in the
Dun,
northern
dun,
part
dun.
here, and this is a better little detailed map of this, where the Ukrainians have now infiltrated and attacked across the decent sized borderline. All right. To mount an offensive into Russia itself. Now, with all of this taking place, what's your opinion, Maddie? I'm curious about your opinion on this.
I mean, it's I've been keeping up with it here and there. It's first of all, we know Putin's not going to stop because his main goal is he wants to reunify Russia and make it the old USSR. That's his whole thing. He's, stuck there, and that's where he's going to. And I think by Ukraine doing this, they're proving that, they can do this and that they will do this because they think it's the only way that, they're going to be able to show Putin, hey, we've been kicking your ass and we're going to continue to do it because we really want you to leave us alone.
See, from a military perspective, I disagree with you, and I'll say, but although slightly, it's just a slight disagreement. You're not wrong. They're doing it so that they can show that they've got some kind of offensive capability. Okay, the problem that they're having is that their offensives in the Donetsk region and so forth, along the Dnieper River and so forth, and even their offensive actions in the Crimea are being they're failing. Okay, the the Crimea they've had some success in attacking the Russian ships and so forth, right? But as far as any kind of
Hmm.
ground offensive, no. Now, the ground itself, the territory itself in the Crimea, where they're basically fighting right now, people don't know this. It's a freaking marsh. Okay, it, it's not. It doesn't lend well, right, to movements of troops. Okay,
Right.
so there's that aspect of it. But the real problem is Russia wants to win with a the traditional Russian method of attrition. Okay, you can kill if you kill as many Russian soldiers as Russians kill Ukrainian soldiers, Russia wins because
Yeah.
eventually the Ukrainians run out of soldiers. That's the reality.
Right.
So they need to when they go on an offensive like this, they need to be able to say, okay, we're killing a lot more Russians than the Ukrainians that are dying. And this was one thing that they could do. The other aspect of it is by doing this, it takes pressure away. All right, it takes the Russians now have to reinforce these areas with troops, which means troops that could be used on an offensive in the Dnieper valleys and those areas, right, can't be used there anymore because they got to be used to shore up the defenses along those
Right.
edges. How successful are they going to be?
Mm-hmm.
Temporarily. This is a temporary success. Okay. They're they've only because let's be perfectly frank, the Ukrainian forces don't have the ability to march on Moscow.
No.
Okay, and the drone attacks that they've been using once again were effective in this region where they weren't being as effective in the where the heavy fighting is taking place in the Donetsk region.
Right.
So it does sit up there and bring out one of the other things that I think most people are not really aware of, whether we like it or not. The war in the Ukraine, from the people's Russians' perspective, is not as unpopular as we wish it would be, and Putin knows that. Putin knows his people. While they may not like the war, they're not truly. It's not truly affecting them the way that we in the West overemphasize that we are. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but it does broaden the scope of the war. Now, this is into Russia. Okay, a little bit further east from there is Belarus. Okay, and if they go into Belarus, it's going to change the dynamic of the war. I really feel that.
Mm-hmm.
We ready to go to the next one?
Yep.
You prepared?
Oh,
This is my feeling. You can disagree with me if you want. I mean, obviously.
oh.
I mean, I'm not saying I'm the perfect person to analyze all of this news and that we're reading, but it's news that I like to read anyway. Israeli airstrike on a Gaza school, all right, used as a shelter, kills at least 80, Palestinian officials say.
Okay, my question is, what is under the shelter?
Well, who is in the shelter is my question.
Well, we know that Hamas is a bunch of cowards and that they hide behind schools, shelters,
They were running the
hospitals.
schools. The schools, their schools are their headquarters.
Well, you know what I mean. They hide behind children,
Good morning,
the
TC.
infirmed,
Yes.
the elderly. That's what I mean by, they hide. They run these facilities, but they're hiding behind civilians that probably don't want anything to do with the conflict. And that's why I call them a bunch of cowards, because it's from my understanding, every time the Israelis are going to do something in an area, whether they're going to invade the area or they're going to bomb it or something, they literally tell the citizens in the area, "Hey, we're going to be there or do this at this time on this day.
Yeah.
If you don't want to be caught in it, leave."
Yeah. Let's read this story here. An Israeli airstrike hit a school-turned-shelter in Gaza early Saturday, killing at least 80 people, Palestinian health authorities said, in one of the deadliest strikes in the 10-month-old war between Israel and Hamas. The Israeli military acknowledged it targeted the Tabin school in central Gaza City, claiming it hit a Hamas command center within the school. Hamas denied that. The United Nations said the latest strike was part of Israel's increasing attacks on Gaza schools, which have been turned into shelters for people who have been forced to flee their homes by the war. Video from the scene shows walls blown out on the school on the ground level of a large building. Concrete chunks and twisted metal lay atop a blood-soaked floor, along with clothing, toppled furniture, and other debris. A blackened car with windows blown out was covered in rubble. Fadel Naim, director of the Al-Alhi Hospital in Gaza City told the Associated Press that the facility received 70 bodies of those killed in the strike and the body parts of at least 10 others. The health ministry said another 47 were also wounded. Okay, in a strike like this, the wounded normally will outnumber the dead by a good number.
Yeah.
Okay, so I suspect that there's a lot more people that were wounded than what they're acknowledging. Now,
Oh,
Fide-
possibly.
Fidel Naim, all right, in my opinion, should be taken out and hung. Okay,
Hmm.
because this is the hospital where they were running the underground tunnel to Hamas's headquarters. All right, with the
Hmm.
UN basically. All right,
Yeah.
these are not good people. Okay,
No.
and here's where I would disagree with one of the statements you said. You said these people don't want to be a part of this war, and I understand people don't want to be a part of the conflict. But the reality is, they elected Hamas,
Well, I
and
mean, it. Okay.
and they're doing
Okay.
nothing. They're doing nothing to remove Hamas. I
Okay.
understand
This is.
they may not stop somebody else from removing Hamas, but they don't see it as their own. They 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 themselves will not do what's necessary to get rid of Hamas.
Okay. This is where my unique perspective on things comes in, depend because of where my parents came from. Okay.
How
How do
dare
we
you?
know?
I'm joking. I'm joking.
How do we know that Hamas being installed as the government wasn't a rigged election? Number one. And number two, how do we know whether or not a lot of these families are living in fear, which is why they're not speaking out or going against the government for fear of bodily harm to either the person that speaks out or the person's loved ones?
Good question.
Because
That's a good
that is
question.
pretty much what kept that's pretty much what kept a lot of Cubans from speaking out against Fidel Castro was, oh, if you speak out against me, you will never be seen again, or a member of your family will mysteriously disappear and they will never be seen again.
That
So,
those are all legitimate questions. Okay. However, I've got an answer. Okay. What you're saying here in this situation. Now, this is different than what the families went through. All right.
I know.
But in this situation, they're being given a choice. Do you fear the violence of the Israelis more, or do you fear the violence of Hamas more? They're being given
Well,
that
I
choice.
would fear I would fear Hamas more because out of all the times, I mean, we've been watching this since TVs were invented. This has been going on long before then. And every time there's a ceasefire, every time it looks like there's going to be some sort of ceasefire or some sort of agreement to, at least stop all the stuff going on for a while. Who has broken it? It's always been Hamas or the Shiites or some sort of terrorist cell that's over there in the Palestinian territory.
PLO, the PLA, the
Hmm. It's
Liberty of
always been
whatever.
them to do it first. Because if you leave Israeli to their own devices and you leave them alone, I'm sure they're probably not going to bother anybody because they're sick and tired of getting bombed, shot at, invaded, yelled at. It's like October 7th happened, and the one thing that pissed me off was, our fucking dementia ridden commander in chief went, "Well, you can retaliate, but you have to be nice about." What the fuck, dude?
Yeah, but see, that's the problem in the region. Okay, the problem is that regionally, these people, like you said, they are willing to side with Hamas more than they are with Israel in this specific circumstance. And I'm not saying you have to side with Israel. I wish people to understand this. I am not an Israeli file. Okay, because the Israelis are they're not above condemnation.
No,
But
they're not.
at the same time, when you're dealing with a group of people who when they're polled, 70% of them say, yeah, there's nothing wrong with putting a bomb on a 5-year-old's chest to go blow up other 5-year-olds. When that's 70% of your population, you have a population problem.
Yeah.
Hamas Hamas is a symptom. The problem is the attitudes of the people incorporated in those regions. Now, how do you fix that? Okay, you can do this tit for tat stuff, which is really, I hate to say this, but people are looking at this whole thing. They're saying, "Oh, look at how bad this is." This isn't this. It's obviously not bad enough to change the minds of the people.
No.
It. I hate to
And
say it.
the other problem we're looking at is, it's comes from a region of the country, and I'm a region of the world that, and I'm including both governments and on this one, that you can't truly trust the information that's coming out from either country. Well, Palestine isn't a country, but you know what I mean.
Yes, yes.
As to what's going on, how many casualties, how many injuries, whether they've done something, whether they haven't done something, because each side is always going to try and paint themselves the victim and not the aggressor.
To a point, I would agree with that. But see, this is to me, it's past the point of aggression. The idea of aggression to me and who's the aggressor is not the problem. The problem is how do you change the population? How do you change the population's mind to convince them that this is not the way to go? We've had these problems in the past. The solutions are severe.
Yeah.
Just pointing this out, and I hate to say, and I know people don't want to hear this, but eventually that solution will be applied. Because it's not gonna work any other way unless you sit up there and put the United States completely in charge of that entire region. All right, to where we can go in there, but we're not the nation we were.
No.
Okay, we
We're a
don't have the
shadow of what we
mentality.
were.
We don't have the mentality necessary to fix this. We can gain it back fairly
No.
rapidly, but the cost of that in American lives, and it's going to cost American. Anybody who keeps talking about, well, this would all go away if the U.S. should just get out of there. No, it wouldn't.
My problem is they're always relying on us to be the world police. Where are all the other countries in this?
Well,
Where are they? What are they doing? Why do we always have to fix the world's messes? This is what's always frustrating, because all hell breaks loose in A, B, or C in the United Nations and the EU, and everybody's going, well, what are you going to do, America? Why is it on us? We're nowhere near Israel or Palestine. Why are you looking at us? Because
you,
right now, our country is so fucking broke that if we would have spent money like they're spending money, our asses would be in jail for fraud.
yes, that's true. But see, I have a solution. It's a simple solution. Okay, it's not a nice solution, but it's a simple and it's relatively cost effective. Okay, and it worked because it worked in World War II. Just
Oh my.
pointing it out. Just pointing it out. But you're right. Why
Mhm.
does it have to be the United States? Why is the population of Canada, which is a third of what the United States is, why aren't the Canadians 1/3 of the forces here to fix this?
Right.
Why can't we draw down to a third of what we had so that they can plus up? Why is it always us? I agree with you 100%.
Yeah.
And I got a couple stories that are going to talk about that. First one's this one. Let me get it pop it up so that people can see it as well. U.S. forces in Syria on high alert after military base attack. This is this is not American news, folks. This is Xinhao news. This is news from China.
Oh,
Communist
another
China.
trusted news source. Another trusted news source.
Well, well, yeah, I mean, let's be honest. If they're going to say something that's happening in America, we got to be fair and use all sources available to us. I could have used
Mhm.
NBC. I could have used Reuters. I could have used AP.
Yeah.
The stories are more or less the same. So, U.S. forces across Syria have been placed on high alert following a midnight attack by an Iranian-backed militias on one of its bases in northeastern province of Hashaka. Is that how we? You're gonna
Don't look
butcher
at
me
me.
for
I
my
do Spanish.
pronunciation.
No, don't look at me. I do Spanish. Mhm.
In the early hours of Saturday morning, an armed drone directly targeted Karib Algier base in the Melon area of Hasaka. All right, leading to significant damage and fires within the facility. The attack was prompted by the U.S.-led coalition has prompted the U.S.-led coalition to bolster its both logistical and military support to its bases across Syria, according to the British-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights.
Uh-huh. Syrian Observatory for Human Rights. Wait, yep.
British-based Syrian.
Mm.
According to the observatory, U.S. bases in Syria have been subjected to 135 attacks by Iranian backed militias since October 19th, 2023.
Color me surprised. Oh, sorry.
The majority of these assaults have focused on the Conoco gas plant, the Al Omar oil field base in the eastern province of Deir al-Zur, all right, and the Al Shaddadi base in the Hasakas countryside. I can't say that word. Uh, the recent escalation comes amid heightened tensions in the northeastern Syria, with U.S. backed Syrian Democratic Forces, the SDF, engaged in clashes with pro Syrian government forces, leading the SDF effectively choking off all routes to the government controlled areas of Hashaka. So
How
basically, the
many
U.S.
bases do we
forces
have
attack.
in Syria?
I suspect that these are bases that we have a few, just a minimum number of U.S. troops in. All right, we probably have of the forward operating bases. I would say that we probably have at least 4 to 5. Um,
Okay.
but for the most part, the people that are there are going to be SF. They're going to be the special forces units. Most of the people who
Yeah.
are affected this are going to be some kind of coalition force of like Iraqis or Syrians that are fighting against Bashir Assad. Okay. Um. Now, why are we there at all? Where are the
Yeah.
Canadians? Where are the Mexicans?
Well, I mean, it's not like just the Canadian. It's like I'm looking at other people that are supposed to be also members of the United Nations, like France or Germany, or well, you know what I mean when I say that. Germany. Where are the people from the European Union at? They're sitting there with their fingers up their butts, probably.
Well, all right. First of all, I
And the French are rating each other's farts. I mean,
okay. My wife has left, so I can say this. D- d- Do you do realize that if you put French troops anywhere, what's the result? Did you see what the French were doing in Africa just 5 years ago?
look, it's the first country that popped
All
into
right.
my head.
All right.
Didn't say it was a good choice. I just
Okay.
said it was the first country that popped into my head.
I, I I was
I mean,
reading the
if
stories
they
from
really
what they
wanted to, look, if France really wanted to shock and awe the country, they could probably drop ship troops in the middle of Syria that are quote unquote transgender and cross dressers. That would probably scare the other
you,
side into submission.
did you read the reports of mass rape that the French troops were committing? They were going out rounding up girls at night.
Jesus.
I mean, it's horrific. If you bring the French back into Syria with this, what do you think the result's going to be?
Ugh.
Now, with the Germans, the problem with the Germans is about 5 years or about 3 years ago, they did a real assessment. You know how the Germans have the Leopard 2, right, which they claim is the best tank
Yeah.
ever, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know how many they had operational? Fully
How
operational?
many?
50. 50.
Wow.
Okay?
Wow.
Fully operational. Now, the stripped down ones, they had a few hundred. This is the nation that fielded the Panzer's forces of thousands and thousands back in the 40s, right? They can't even field 1,000 Leopard 2s right
Wow.
now. And everyone bitches about the United States. Oh, why is the U.S. doing this? Because we're the only ones with the forces to actually do it. Everyone else has been, quite frankly, ignoring their own defense, saying the United States will cover us so that they can sit up there and live this socialist dream on America's dime. That's what they've
Yeah.
been doing. These are not. These people are supposed allies. There's only one real ally we have in the entire European region, and that, believe it or not, is Britain. And quite frankly,
Yeah.
the British, the British have their own problems.
Yeah. They most certainly do.
And if you're wondering what kind of problems we're talking about, I will pull it up for
Alrighty.
you right
Nice
here.
segue.
Yes, nice segue. We'll go right into this one. Uh, you know who else should be on trial? This is from The Guardian. The Guardian is a far left paper, yes. But it's one of the most widely read, isn't it? Papers in Britain?
Well, I mean, it's the most one of the widely published, at least on the internet. You see them everywhere.
Well, I hear about them all over, even in when the BBC's talking, so they're quite well known. You know who else should be on trial for the UK's far right riots? Elon Musk, from Jonathan Freeland.
Wow.
Direct guilt sits with those who brought violence to our streets, but their hatred was inflamed by lies spread on X. Oh!
Reed Richards would be proud at the amount of reach in this particular article.
Right. One man is missing. Of course, it's good that so many of those responsible for a week of terrifying far right violence are facing an equally swift and severe form of justice. But there's one extremely rich and powerful suspect who should join them in the dock if the UK authorities truly want to hold accountable those who unleashed riots and pogroms. These are pogroms. These are pogroms. Did you know that? Did you did you know that this is a pogrom? This is an official
Wow.
act by the British authorities apparently. Because that's what a
Wow.
pogrom is, moron. They talk about my poor English. All right. They need to go after Elon Musk. To be sure, direct guilt belongs to the culprits on the ground, those currently being fast tracked in their hundreds through a usually glacial court system, moving from arrest to charges, trial, conviction, and heavy sentencing in a matter of days. Guilt belongs to those who surrounded hostels housing migrants and refugees, attempting to set them on fire and threatening to kill those inside. But it doesn't sit up there and have anything to do with the guys that were raping and grooming in mass, does it?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I love how they conveniently leave out the fact that, the actual British people are fed up with the government turning a blind eye to the rape gangs and the Sharia law that the people are trying to enforce in London and all this shit. They turn a blind eye to that, but they want to blame Elon. Elon Musk is just an idiot that bought the fucking Twitter. And once he bought it, he's got people there that are running the website. Albeit every once in a while the website hiccups because they think they're smoking pot over there or something, but I can't prove it. Elon's got nothing. He's not over there waving a flag and telling
Joe
everybody,
Rogan
it's
episode
time to
mean
stand
anything to
up
you?
for yourself, and handing out, knives of peace and and driving vans of peace and blah blah blah. The British people are sick and tired of the bullshit. That's why they're rioting. They're sick and tired of whenever they try and speak out against what's going on, and it happens to be a Muslim or somebody from the Islamic faith that's the radical part of the Islamic faith doing all this bullshit. The government goes, oh, no, 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 you can't do that because you're the bigot, and now you're committing a hate crime. Motherfucker, they're raping children. That's not a hate crime. That's a fact.
It is perfectly acceptable in their culture.
Yeah, but it's not
And they're
perfectly
going to.
acceptable in Britain's culture.
I
And
agree,
and
and
you've
it
got
shouldn't be acceptable anywhere. To be perfectly
well, it
honest.
shouldn't be, but the whole thing is you've got a clash of two cultures. You've got the British culture that has been around since forever, and then you've got the Sharia law, the fundamentalist Islamists. Let's say we're gonna call them fundamentalist Islamists. That the last thing on their mind is integrating into society and following the laws that are established in the country that they migrated to.
Right.
They're not going to do that. They're not
Because
going to assimilate.
well, they're not going to assimilate because forced assimilation is not going to be utilized because we in the West
Well,
are too
integration.
tolerant
Excuse
of it.
me, integration.
No, you
Yeah.
you need the forced integration. Okay, people
Yeah.
when cultures are too different. Okay, and one is and when cultures, and I've said this many times, culture A, culture B, when they come in contact, there's only three outcomes. Culture A kills culture B, culture B kills culture A, or they amalgamate into a C. Now,
Hmm.
the amalgamation into a C rarely happens. It does happen,
Mm.
all right, but it's really, really rare, and it only happens when culture A and culture B are not totally where they have lots of points of commonality to start with. If they don't,
Right.
one of the other two is going to be the result. It has to be. And I know
Yeah.
what
Well, I mean,
people
it's
say, and they're upset about people losing their identities and their social identities and so forth when it's forced on people. And I understand that viewpoint. The problem is it's myopic. It's simplistic. It's
yeah.
a I wish things were different, but they're not. You can
Yeah.
wish in one hand and shit in the other, and the wish fairy is going to be missing.
Yeah.
Just putting it out there. Okay,
I mean,
this is what it is.
it also depends on which B culture is coming into A's country because if it is a fundamentalist, strict theocratic type of culture, they're not going to want to integrate because they have their own laws, their own way of doing things, and it's fundamentalist to a fanatical point. They're not going to change.
I don't think
Okay?
religion in a lot of times. I'm not saying it's not an element because it's an element that reinforces the society. Okay, but the social
Yeah.
problems with these cultures are they're a 12th century mentality culture. They're living in the 12th
Yeah.
century. They're living by 12th
Yeah.
century morality. You can't live by 12th century morality with modern weaponry in a modern culture. You
Mm.
can't do it. It's the
Mm-mm.
reason we had World War II. Most people don't understand
Yeah.
that. The reason we had World War II had a lot more to do with the fact that you were dealing with the German society, which was still mired, okay, in a 14th century mentality. There were people in World War II. There were people who remembered being peasants, true peasants on land. Okay, the
Yeah.
Junkers were a part of this.
Yeah.
For those who don't know, they were the aristocracy of the Germans. Now, the Germans were not a unified force until Bismarck in the 1800s, the latter part of the 1800s, early 1900s, where Bismarck basically molded the German states. All right, along the Prussian model. Okay, but it was a culture war more than anything else that allowed Hitler, all right, to gain the kind of power that he did and launch World War II. America's involvement began for the same reason because the Japanese were terrified of losing their Japaneseness. If you look at the Japanese papers prior to World War II, how they talked about themselves, how they talked about the West, they had a chip on their shoulders saying the West doesn't, they don't give us our due respect. Okay,
Well,
at the
it's happening. It's,
well, let me
go
give you an
ahead.
example of something. At the Washington Peace Conference, okay, where they decided the 553 strategy. I don't know if you know what that is. Okay, it's
Mm,
for every three capital ships that Japan had, Britain could have five, and America could have five.
okay.
Okay, and the Japanese said, "Well, that's racist." Well, the problem that they had was they're people who knew, and this included Yamamoto. Yamamoto was one of the people who signed that document, and he wasn't able to convince the populace that, hey, this is a good treaty for us because we do not have the resources, all right, to compete with America or compete with Britain. It's not a
Mm,
slight, especially from the Americans, which they looked at us as the major enemy, especially the Americans, because we had two oceans that we had to protect.
yeah.
And so, but the people took it as a slight. The populace took it as that's them just looking down on us because we're Asian, right?
Yeah.
Without
Well, I
any
mean, you also have to,
acknowledgement.
the mentality of the time during World War II is the fact that, the emperor was also seen as a godlike figure.
Well, yeah, that's true, but which is another aspect of the feudalism that they had just came from, right?
Hmm.
And that's what I'm talking about, though. They were a feudalistic society who then said, okay, well, we're gonna modernize. And if you ever read about the modernization, that was after the Meiji Restoration, which is where they put the emperor back as the temporal head, not just the spiritual head of the nation, right?
Hmm.
It was quite violent, all right, and it was quite oppressive. It also was quite effective, okay, in that
Yeah.
they got the modern means to all of this, right? But the families were still very traditional. They still said, well, my family was samurai, and we had this the layers of structure of the society were still layered that way. It was a problem culturally. They couldn't exist this way. It's one of the reasons why with Germany they found common ground with Germans because the mentalities were closer. All right,
Yeah.
there's literally no reason. All right, if you when you look at it outside of the cultural differences, there's really no reason that Japan didn't look to Britain and say we're going to be Britain's ally, that they're going to be our major ally. They admired the British Navy. They modeled their own navy from the British Navy. They even had Britain building some of their warships.
Hmm.
Okay, so well then you look at, well, how did they become so angry with the British? Well, they're never really angry with the British per se. They're really more angry against America. In fact, that's what they all were doing, is they were going to come after America, right? Because
Yep.
they looked at America as being the biggest brandest problem in the Pacific, right?
Yep.
Especially when Roosevelt cut off oil. That was a that was the final straw. They had determined they were going to
Hmm.
go to war with us when we cut off oil. If they had not attacked the United States, our entry into World War II would have been a lot different. I still think we would have ended up in
Yep.
World War II, but I can tell you right now, we may not have
Much
gone to
later.
war with Japan. All right, and it
No.
wouldn't have had the same kind of consequences.
Well, I
But
mean, we would have entered it much later because we were heavy into, isolationism and okay, it's not our problem. It hasn't hit our doorstep yet. There's nothing for us to worry about. Yada 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 yada. But eventually, we would have been, having to join into the fray, so to speak, in order to keep our alliances strong.
well, it was the only way that we were going to keep Britain from collapsing.
Yeah.
Right? That's the reality, right? We were already headed in that direction because of our shipping was being sunk by by German U-boats. Okay,
Yeah.
so I mean, I agree with you. We were heading that way anyway. Whether or not we would have went to war with Japan, though, would have been a different story.
Yeah.
Because the United States did not look at Japan the same way that we never looked at Asia the same way that most of the Western other countries look at
Yeah.
that.
I
Okay,
mean, at the time, Japan didn't have the resources, or to actually, keep up a navy, so to speak, because they're a small island with very limited resources. So
right.
they were already behind the eight ball, which is why I think they did not to say they weren't resourceful, because they were very resourceful. It's
Oh
just that,
yeah, oh yeah.
they had the least amount of resources as everybody else, but they were making the most out of what they had.
After World War One, there was a little bit of a push for Japanese to come to America. Right? And one of the things that they did when the Japanese arrived on the American shores is they were astounded, okay, that they could walk into a trash dump and find cans of metal cans littering the place. And they
Mhm.
scavenged. These people started scavenging the cans so they could melt them down and make nails.
Yeah.
Because there was this metal was not something that's very easy to find in Japan on the Japan
Nope.
Islands. They were a resource. They have certain resources, but when it comes to a modern industrial state, whether we like it or not, we still haven't changed. It requires iron. It requires steel. A modern
Yeah.
industrial state still relies heavily on steel and iron. There are no big freaking iron mines in Japan. They just don't exist. All right. So one of the reasons that they had attacked and were trying to conquer China was to try and gain what they thought of as the vast mineral resources that they could get access to.
Yeah.
The problem is even though that they had more resources, they still weren't even close to the kind of resources that was necessary to fuel their modern military. That's just the way it was. There was nothing to do with it. But back to Britain again, because we kind of got sidetracked a little bit there. They're actually in they're actually saying that they're going to arrest Americans for posting things like you need to get rid of and deport all your immigrants, your illegal
Yeah.
immigrants.
That's
Stick around, folks, because it's coming to America. Okay, if mass deportations will be the end result sooner or later, not because of who gets elected or who doesn't get elected. It's because that's the only options that are going to be left when push comes to shove. What other choices are you going to be left with, Maddie? Are you there?
yeah. Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, I was just wondering if you disagree with something. All right, let's get on to the next
I'm
story, shall
gonna.
we? Okay, never mind.
Okay.
Go ahead. You were going to say something?
No, I was gonna tell you that I was just listening.
Oh, okay. On to the next story. Flags banned, signs ripped up. You can't mention Taiwan at the Olympics. The table tennis arena was churning sea of color with spectators waving the Chinese five stars and the French tricolor. But despite its athletes competing on the floor, one of the competitors' flags was nowhere to be seen. Taiwan's. At the Paris 2024, Taiwan's red and blue flag was banned, as is the name Taiwan and its anthem. The island, which is claimed by Peking or Beijing, all right, is one of the three competitors whose flag is banned from the Olympics. The others being Russia and Belarus over the invasion in the Ukraine. The policy has seen several flashpoints in these games. During Sunday's thrilling men's double badminton final, in which Taiwan's Li Yang and Wang Chi Lin bested China's Liang Wei King and Wang Cheng. All right, at least I got the last one right. All right, to retain their title for Tokyo. A sign reading "Let's Go Taiwan" was ripped out of the hands of fans and torn up. The green towel reading "Taiwan" was confiscated from another supporter during the match, according to news reports and witnesses. Those who were there said it was not clear who seized the items. This guy has a security band. I mean, it looks like he's French security.
Okay, if you have a country competing in the Olympics, because Russia was banned from competing this time around because of obvious reasons. Okay, banning the every other fucking country can wave their flag and say, "Let's go," insert your country here, but you can't do it if you're Belarus. You can't do it if that's bullshit. Okay, because they're here to root on their countrymen that are competing. Now, I can see if somebody held up a sign that was literally politically motivated saying, make Taiwan a free state, yada, 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 blah, blah, blah. Okay, fine. Taking that sign and tearing it up because you don't want any political statements in the Olympics, I can go with that. Okay, that I can understand because you want to be neutral. This is about the athletes and the athletic competition. This has nothing to do with what's going on in the world between Taiwan and Beijing and that contention over there. Because they have the same problem with Hong Kong and China. So, and you can wave the Hong Kong flag. You can say, go Hong Kong. I've seen them because my mom watches it. I've watched a couple of events. But it's like, if they're not doing it, if they don't have politically motivated signs, then allow them to cheer for their own country. Don't ban it.
I agree. There's nothing wrong with what they're doing, in my opinion, or as far as waving those things. But then again, I come from a country where we tolerated people sitting there putting the black power fist up, and back in '68. In '68 yet, okay. For those who don't remember, right? I actually do remember that. I remember the big deal with that. And they also jumped on a white guy because at the Olympics because he covered his hand with his heart, right, when the national anthem was played, but he forgot to take off his hat. Okay. All right, just so you understand, it was a different world back then.
Yeah. Dress and cover, people. Dress and cover.
Right. It was quite a different spectacle. But then again, there were a lot of things that were different. All right, you end up with the '72 Olympics. I remember that one quite vividly. Right. I remember the disgrace where they stripped the American basketball team of their gold that they actually won. All right, and you're never going to change my mind on that. For those who don't know, you can look it up. All right, the Olympics have been a disgrace for a long time in a lot of ways. But if you're going to sit there and say, let's not be political, don't start off the freaking games trying to make a political statement.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I mean, well, the Paris has been a debacle, the biggest debacle yet, because you had the swimmers getting sick in the Seine. You had that wonderful display that pissed off even the French Catholic Church, and then you had them trying to feed the athletes a quote unquote eco-friendly diet to the point where Britain went, screw this, we're flying in our own chefs to actually feed our athletes. It's been one mess after another. And now there's you can't wave the flag.
When you're begging for British cuisine, you sunk low.
I mean, it's like now it's you can't wave the Taiwanese flag because how dare you cheer for your country because Taiwan has this thing. Look, if you want it to be neutral, let everybody wave their flag.
Well,
period.
It's supposed
let
to
everybody
be,
cheer for their countries.
It's supposed to be a nationalistic event. Just leave it as a nationalistic event. Don't try to sit there and make political statements out of it. But see, that's where the problem is. Everyone wants these athletes to be political. They're political. I don't want the athletes to be political at all. I want them to shut up. Right. I want the same thing from celebrities too, and I realize that
Amen.
ain't happening either. But
No.
it's something that should happen, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's just gotten to the point in this country where, and then you see it on Twitter, you see it on other social media platforms, where you have a famous person actually trying to avoid any kind of political issues, and people are getting pissed off at him because they're not taking a stance one way or the other. It's not your business what their political beliefs are. It should have never been that way. It should have never gotten to that point. They're actors, they're actresses, they're singers, they're performers. Let them perform, and that's it. I don't care who they're going to vote for or why they're going to vote for them. I don't give a shit if they're conservative, if they're Republican, if they're libertarian. My thing is if they're going to get on stage and charge me $250 for a fucking ticket, can they sing?
And that's
If I'm going to pay $25 a ticket to sit in the theater, can they act? Is the movie going to be worth my fucking time? Those are the only kind of answers that I want to seek. I don't give a shit if you're going to vote for Biden, because if you do, in my opinion, if they vote for Biden, they're as brain dead as he's going to be.
Biden is
Because
a different
I
story. But I mean, I'm not even going to get involved in that right now. We'll talk about
you know
Biden a
well
little
I
bit
mean
later.
my only thing I'm going to say about Biden is this is the most egregious form of elderly abuse I have seen on a fucking national scale ever. The man should have not run the first time, let alone tried running for office a second time.
With the well, I won't get. I'll talk more about it later. All right,
Mhm.
let's talk about this next story. Brazil. Plane crash in Brazil. Witnesses reveal how the Brazilian plane carrying doctors en route to a seminar narrowly missed crashing into a neighborhood before it fell out of the sky and exploded. All right, to leave 61 dead as aviation experts determine the likely cause of death spiral. Now, this tells me that they're telling you they know what the likely cause of the death spiral is. But then down here
Mhm.
they go into, oh, it could be this, it could be that, it could be this, it could be that. For those who don't know, I mean, I will play this just so we can take a look at what this was. Um, it should play. Warning. Oh yes, the graphic warning here.
Pancaking everybody.
Boom.
From what was explained to me on the news yesterday, Matt, that's what happens
Porra.
when your engines stall. You go into a flat spin like that and fall right out of the sky.
Yeah. Flat spins are a known phenomenon. Okay,
Yeah.
since the earliest planes, and it wasn't until fairly recently, okay, where people learned techniques to attempt to get out of it. If
Yeah.
you don't get out of it, if you fail to get out of it, you're
You
going to
pancake.
crash. All
Mm-hmm.
right, and you're going to crash very violently. All
Yeah.
right, and you could see the speed at which that plane was flat spinning down into the ground. Okay,
Yeah.
you could also hear the engines. All right, right, trying to basically get bite into the air.
Yeah.
Right,
Mm-hmm.
that's why you're getting that helicopter kind of sound, because it's an attempt by the blades to actually engage. So this was not an engine issue in the sense of the engines not being completely gone, because they weren't.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, there's been several in the story. They go into several possible things that could have happened. Something could have broken off. Something could have affected the avionics, basically the flaps or the rudder or something along those lines. The the airfoils and so forth, right? Or one of the suggestions is that because there had been a warning about ice at the elevation that they were flying, which was 17,000 feet for those who don't know.
Yeah.
Okay, it's it's impossible to know what exactly happened per se. It is winter. The thing to remember is it's winter down there in the south. That's why it's cold, right?
Yeah.
This is their winter in the southern hemisphere, folks. Right? I mean, we always think of Brazil as being this warm place, but I mean, not in the wintertime. It's not. All right, so it's unfortunate for these people. I think that the pilots did whatever they could. Obviously, we don't know exactly what happened. They did find the black boxes. They'll be able to at least piece some of this stuff together. All right, as to what happened.
Yeah.
Right. Um, but what bothers me about this story is you're telling me that they'd already determined what it is, and then you come back and tell me, well, they're guessing, and it's still too early to know exactly what happened. You know.
Like, which one is it?
you
And then it's like when we were discussing before you came up here to start the stream, it's like we were watching it up here, I think on Channel 5 or whatever, and they were talking to somebody that had retired from the NTSB, and the journalist asked a brain dead question, and I call it a brain dead question because he literally asked the guy, "Do you think the passengers knew what was going on?" Well, I don't know if they were looking out the window. They were seeing the goddamn sky go round and round and round and round and round as they were falling out of the sky. I'm sure they figured it out.
Somebody did. I guarantee they were screaming on that plane
Oh, I'm sure there was.
because when it's falling like that at that speed in the flat spin, you're almost weightless. You really are
Yeah.
almost weightless at that point. So I feel I suspect that they all knew, unfortunately, what was happening. It was just nothing they could. There's nothing you can do. There's literally nothing you
Yeah.
can do at that point. You know, you're you are at the mercy of gravity, and gravity wins.
Yep.
Okay, eventually gravity wins. I want that's a note. I don't believe in this expanding universe forever. Eventually gravity wins. Just putting out my disagreement with the majority of the physics community. All right, let's get on to the next story. Two astronauts are stuck in space. Here's how they're passing the time. Boy, this is an important story from the Wall Street Journal. Huh? More than 2 months have passed since a Boeing spacecraft brought them to the International Space Station for a planned 8-day mission.
Whoopsie.
Sunita Williams made headlines years ago for running a marathon on a treadmill at the International Space Station. Preparing to return in June for a 1 week visit, she didn't plan on a repeat. This time we might have to have too little time to be able to do a marathon, she said in a press briefing in March. As it turned out, Williams may have the time after all. Williams and her fellow astronaut Barry Wilmore are caught in the middle of a debate within the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA, all right, over whether Boeing's Starliner vehicle, which took them to the ISS, is safe enough to bring them back. I think
Wow.
is I think it's a better way to say that is able to bring them back safely.
Yeah.
I mean, it's going to bring them back.
Boeing, we get you there, just not in one piece.
you will arrive at your destination one way or another, even if it's piece by piece.
Boeing, an adventure in every flight. Oh.
What was expected to be roughly a 1 week mission has turned into a summer in space, with their stay possibly lasting until early next year. Boeing said that it's confident Starliner is up to the task of transporting the astronauts home. Williams and Wilmore arrived at the space station in early June with limited luggage and duties. Since then, the two have been immersed themselves into day-to-day routines and research 250 miles above the Earth's surface, studying microbes, microgravity jogs, tinkering with equipment, and taking in some of the 16 sunrises and sunsets visible each 24-hour period. We've been thoroughly busy here, says Williams, right, during a short news conference in July. The last time she and Wilmore have spoken publicly, tasks she's highlighted include gene sequencing work, an experiment involving a moon microscope, and replacing a pump for a system that converts astronauts' urine into water. Last week, Whitmore spent time inspecting plumbing hardware and more recently installed a light meter in Veggie, a planting project where astronauts have grown radishes and other crops. Williams set up high definition video gear. It sounds like a bunch of make work, to be honest.
Hmm.
Other
It just
activities of
reminded
her
me of that song from Rapunzel, When Will My Life Begin?
All right, I've kind of been following this story, which is why I decided to go ahead and do this. the NASA is worried about when it came back that there's possible problems with the heat shielding, right? But it came back once already, right? So
Yep.
the question is it safe enough to get them back in? Now, there's also the debate, quite frankly, because the Boeing Starliner rides
Yeah.
atop uh, the Musk SpaceX platforms.
Ah.
Okay, so that could also be an issue that's inhibiting all this. And there's been
Mm.
some there's been some recent SpaceX failures that have been quite dramatic. let's put it that way. Okay, not the least of which is just recently he attempted to put more Starlink satellites, and
Yeah.
the second stage refused to ignite, so they just blew the satellites all over freaking space. They detonated the thing just to blow them up. Now, the thing about the Starlink satellites, for those who don't know, they're about the size of you know a bread box, I guess, large bread box. Um, but they
Yeah.
throw up a lot of them. But the orbit that they're in, it decays fairly rapidly. It's not one of those things where it's going to stay up there for 15, 20 years. They decay fairly
Yeah.
rapidly. All right, which is why you got to keep seeding them up there. You got to keep throwing them up there. Right. Eventually, there'll be too friggin' many of the damn things, but that's a separate
Yeah.
issue. Okay. Dentist charged with alleged burrito battery. Can we guess the state?
Florida?
Let's guess the state. Florida. An argument early Saturday began over Dr. Isha Pashad, a 34-year-old dentist, getting her husband Taco Bell and McDonald's for his birthday, according to court records. During the 12:20 a.m. squabble, 12:20 a.m. squabble. All right. Um, Prasad allegedly threw a soft shell taco at the 35-year-old birthday boy. The delicacy struck the man on the right side of his face, cops reported. When a patrolman responded to the couple's St. Petersburg residence, Florida confirmed. All right. All right. The burrito was still on the victim's face. That's a pretty sticky
Wait,
burrito.
first they said soft taco, now they're saying it's a burrito. Which one is it?
It's unclear why an arrest report alternatively refers to the Mexican missile as a taco and a burrito. Though perhaps the investigator is actually referring to the tortilla. All right, the victim,
Eh,
who has been married to Prashad for 5 years, said he was not injured by the Taco Bell menu item. Okay, can somebody tell me why the police were called?
I don't know. Ban assault tacos.
After being read her rights, Prashad reportedly said that she threw a burrito at the victim after he threw a bag at her.
So he threw a bag at her and she escalated it by throwing a burrito or a taco or a burrito or whichever one it was because they keep changing the fucking food item in the story. Good Lord.
No, at least Prashad, excuse me, was arrested for domestic battery, a misdemeanor, and booked into county jail, from which she was later released on her own recognizance. Um, this sounds like a couple's spat. Why the hell were the police called?
Hey, lady, what are you in for? I threw a burrito at my husband.
Burrito battery.
Aggravated battery. Really? What was the weapon? A burrito. It was a 7-layer burrito, so it was really heavy.
Those police are always lying. It wasn't even a burrito. It was a taco.
Yeah.
It was a sauce held chicken. Which leads to the next question. Okay, now maybe Florida's different, but if I called the police right now on a domestic battery situation, all right, I could probably come close to figuring out, learn how to, and then actually knit a sweater before
Mm,
the police would arrive, right?
I mean, it depends where in Florida you're at. So yeah, I mean,
I,
but
which,
still, it's fucking ridiculous. Why are you gonna call the police? Well,
well,
first of all, how in the hell does a call like that take place? Help! My wife is assaulting me with a taco and a burrito.
she's got a churro. Oh God, I'm in mortal danger. It's a churro.
Hey, the only time you're in mortal danger from a fast food is if somebody gives you a Popeyes biscuit without anything to drink it with. Because that's the choking hazard.
Rubber biscuit. Oh my God. I just the question still remains: why were you still wearing the food item?
Right?
Okay, were you trying to make a fat? Maybe she was doing dress up.
Yeah.
He obviously thought he
Sir,
looked
why do
better.
you still have taco on your face? Well, I figured you'd want photo evidence. No, motherfucker, it's a taco.
I told you we'd get to this story sooner or later. Let's get to this one.
Yeah.
Pence says he's staying out of the presidential campaign. If you were
Well,
staying
good for
out of the
him.
presidential campaign, you should not have said anything.
Right.
All right, just trying to point that out. Okay. Former Vice President
Yeah.
Mike Pence on Friday said that he does not intend to endorse or wade into the presidential race this November, expressing concerns about the direction of the Republican Party while criticizing the Democratic agenda. For my part, I'm staying out of the presidential campaign, Pence said at The Gathering, an event organized by conservative radio host Eric Erickson. Don't even know who
See,
that
now
is.
I'm imagining a whole bunch of conservatives sitting around tables playing Magic the Gathering. You can't put. Can you call it something else? Gee.
All right. For for the reasons that I cannot endorse this growing abandonment of our allies on the world stage that has taken hold in parts of our party, he said, I cannot endorse ignoring our national debt, which has reached 35 trillion just in the last week. I cannot support marginalizing the right to life in our party, as we saw in our national platform. Okay, Mr. Pence, go away.
Hmm?
All right, nothing nothing against anybody. First of all, you're talking about our allies on the world stage. You want to point one out? Aside from Britain, you want to point one out? Who?
Well, what gets me is the fact that he's making a statement saying that he's not going to make a statement while making many statements.
The double speak is strong. Yes.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's typical politician stuff. I am now proclaiming that I am not going to talk about anything going on in the campaign while I'm talking about shit that's going on in the campaign and in the Democratic Party. But I'm not going to be talking about either one of them, so don't ask me.
Yeah. It's just nonsense. It's 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 it's,
That gets
it's
a heh?
rubbish. It's utter rubbish. Okay,
Mhm.
look, dude. I I I am not one of these Pence haters. Okay, that many people are. Right. He has his flaws. He has. I disagree with him on certain aspects. I agree with him in other aspects. Right.
Hmm.
To be honest, for example, I'm more closely aligned with his abortion stances than most people are, right? But that isn't the issue here. The issue is, look, dude,
Yeah.
you're being held up for one purpose and one purpose only, right? As a counter to Donald Trump, which means you even showing up and making a statement is making a statement, any statement,
Yep.
all right, and everybody knows it. Stop this false humility of, oh, I'm out of the fray. I'm the reasonable moderate. Can't you tell? Shut up, dude. Just shut up.
But
And
that's politics, though. They can't help it.
I hate moderates. I really do hate moderates. This is in a surprise to no one. Thousands of non-citizens registered voters discovered, the governor says.
Legas.
Like, yeah. On Wednesday, Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin. How do you end up with a name like Youngkin?
I don't know. Mm.
See that he doesn't look Asian to me. That looks like an Asian name, doesn't it? Youngkin.
It does. It does. It
Right?
does. It's in regards to responding to the headline one more time, I'm going to paraphrase somebody that we have known for years. Imagine my shock.
I'm shocked. Shocked to find gambling going on. All right. Signed an executive order cementing the election security protocols of the state, noting that since he took office, Virginia has discovered and removed more than 6,000 non-citizen registered voters from the voting rolls.
Oh, they removed 6,000 Democrats.
Okay. With the national presidential election less than 90 days away, the GOP is pushing for stricter voter regulations, all right, to safeguard election integrity. Voting in a federal election without citizenship is a federal crime that is punishable by imprisonment and fines. There is no significant evidence of widespread non citizen voting. Then how did
6,000
6,000 of them get registered? Why would
Do they read these
6,000
things?
non citizens, why would 6,000 non citizens, right, register to vote
My,
if they don't intend to vote?
see, my whole thing is, if they actually had an editor reading this shit before they published it, they would probably ask the same question I'm about to ask. How the hell did you just post that there were 6,000 unregistered voters that were non-citizens in here, that you found those votes, and then on the second hand, you're trying to tell me this isn't widespread? Go back and write this shit again. You just canceled yourself out. What the
After after signing the order, Youngkin said that the Virginia model for election security works. This isn't a Democrat or Republican issue. It's an American and a Virginian issue. Every legal vote deserves to be counted without being watered down by illegal votes or inaccurate machines. Executive
or
Order
dead people?
Executive Order 35 mandates a documented chain of custody for paper ballots, the format in which all Virginians must cast their vote. Youngkin emphasized the order, right? Virginia does not use voting machines, just paper counting machines. All right. The order also stipulates that those paper ballots must be retained by court clerks for 22 months. In addition, absentee ballots may not be counted until the last four digits of the voter's social security number and year of birth provided on the envelope are matched to the voter's record in statewide voter registration system. The governor stated earlier in the order that Virginia is one of the few states that require those registering to vote to provide their full 9-digit social security number for registration. Okay, I've got several problems with this. Okay, for those who don't know or suspect. I mean, obviously Maddie knows me, so she's like, yeah, what else is new? Right. My problem starts with this. just because you have saying, okay, there has to be documented chain of custody. Okay, I'm all for
Mm-hmm.
that. We had that in Arizona.
Mm-hmm.
The problem was when it was violated, there's nothing that tells you what to do if it's violated. So the
Nope.
result was they counted everybody. So you had massive breaks in the chain of custody, and they still counted those votes because there was nothing
Mm-hmm.
that said don't. What good does that do?
Hey, not to mention the fact that tying it to the social security number sounds like a good idea, but you have people that commit fraud. You have illegal aliens coming into the country obtaining a social security number illegally.
Oh, you definitely have identity theft, all right, but
Mm-hmm.
and that is a problem. There's no doubt about that. There's that aspect of it as well. But my biggest issue with this whole thing is like, okay, you put in a thing saying this has to take place, and I'm all for that aspect of it. But you didn't sit up there and give us what the remedies is. If the rule is if the chain of custody is broken, these votes can't count. Okay, then I would be a little bit more amenable to this.
Yeah.
Now I realize there's a problem with that too because if you put that into place, how easy would it be to have a nefarious individual intentionally break the custody in a precinct that's heavily one way or the other and say, okay, none of these ballots can count.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's that aspect of it too. I'm not ignorant, right? But if you
Yeah.
don't have somebody who's willing to sit up there and say, look here, there's reason to believe there's a problem here, and there's no investigation, you end up eventually. There's going to be several incidences that happen, like with Athens, Tennessee. There are going to be several
Yeah.
Athens, Tennessees taking place.
Well, my whole thing is you can have what equates to a solid system in order to keep the votes or the ballots actually safe and secure until it's time to count them. And it'll look great on paper. It'll look absolutely perfect and foolproof on paper. The problem is that is quote unquote on paper. When you factor in the humans that are supposed to be installed along the lines of this particular system, you can run background checks for fucking days. You're not going to be able to tell whether that person has integrity, whether they're honest, whether they actually want to, maintain the chain of command or not, or whether somebody off in the shadows, and I know this is a tinfoil hat thing, but bear with me, somebody off in the shadows has already pulled them over to the side, slipped them a few $1,000s, and went, we wouldn't
By the
say
way, here's a
anything.
picture of your family. They look like a nice family.
Just
Here's your
a
daughter's
couple of
school and
suitcases.
everything.
Yeah, right. It's tinfoil hatty, but we know it happens.
Because it has, right?
Hmm.
In Athens, do you know about the incident in Athens, Tennessee?
Mm-mm.
Okay, what happened in Athens, Tennessee was there was a surprise, surprise, a Democrat sheriff, and he was the one who was quote unquote the one in charge of counting the votes, and people
Okay.
were complaining because they're like, it was only him and his buddies that seemed to be winning these things, right?
Hmm.
So the people said, we want to see the ballots. We want independent things. And they ran that all the way up to the federal government and the FBI. And they all said, well, we don't see enough evidence that there's actually any cheating going on. Okay.
Wow.
So a bunch of good old boys that had just come back from World War II picked up their rifles and said, oh no, we're getting the ballots. And a firefight ensued.
Oh wow.
All right. Now, no, believe it or not, no one was really hurt, but it did force the feds to actually come in, get the ballots, and lo and behold, the sheriff who was in charge of counting the ballots was lying about what the ballot numbers were. Surprise, surprise, surprise.
Yeah.
But it literally took the citizens of the city basically going to war with the city itself to get effective redress of what was going on.
Yeah.
And it's look the real problem starts with the judiciary. Okay, so one of the reasons why I make some of the comments that I do about our judiciary, the people that we had, we always wish that our judges were like Roy Bean, right? And I don't mean
Mm.
Roy Bean in hang 'em all, hang 'em high. No, that's not what I mean. I'm talking about
Yeah.
somebody who's tough, who's individualistically minded, and is willing to make the hard decision. All right,
Yeah.
regardless of what the consequences are. If he says this is what the law is, if he believes that this is what the law is, he's making his decisions based on the law.
Yeah.
We wish that that's who our judges were. That's not who they are. They're a bunch of
No.
freaking silly, cowardly, lily-livered asshats. The vast majority of them. They are.
I'm not disagreeing with you.
And so you end up with decisions, like I've said in the past, like the Miranda decision, right?
Yeah.
Now, I've tried to explain this to people. The Miranda decision was a horrific decision. And people are like, oh, it just got people to read that the police had to read their rights. Okay, fine. Why is it that reading ignorance of the law is not an excuse, unless, of course, it's ignorance of the law of the land, the Constitution?
Right. Yeah.
Can you make that make sense? And it's because of that decision where they took away individual accountability. All right. Now I'm not against telling the police that they have to read their rights, but that's for the legislature to put in place, not a judge.
Yeah.
And
Well,
it's
it's like
that
they did the same thing with Roe versus Wade. It's
yes,
they didn't. First of all, for those of us that actually had a civics class and paid attention to civics class, the only branch of the government that is allowed to pass legislation is Congress, signed by the executive branch. The only thing the judicial branch is good for is by having a law across their desk or a certain case or whatever, and they're going, okay, well, this precedent was set, this precedent hasn't been set. No, this law is not constitutional by any measure of the extreme, so we're going to strike this down. Their whole job is to tell us whether or not the laws that are, being made are constitutional or not. They're not there to legislate, which is what the fuck they did in the case of Roe versus Wade.
exactly right,
I mean, people all over the
and
country can be
illegally
pissed
at
off that, people
that.
all over the country can be pissed off that, yeah, that they rescinded Roe versus Wade, but they corrected an error. Whether you like it or not, they corrected an error. Congress has had over 50 years to codify what an abortion law, and they haven't done it. Now it's a state by state issue, and this is why we've got the chaos we've got now
Well, it should have always been
about,
left. It
the
should have
abortion
always been
issue
left up to
on a
the
state
states.
by state basis.
It should have always been left up to the states. To be honest, it's not something the federal government
Hmm.
needs to be involved in. What federal issue is involved in that?
Yeah, but there are some state laws out there that are absolutely fucking
Well,
ridiculous in
okay, but
regards to
those
abortion.
people in those states can have their own rules for what those laws are, right? That's it's up to them within that state, right, to fix it, right?
Yeah,
I don't think it's something that Congress ever needed to get involved in, all right? There's no impelling federal need to make the decision on abortion.
yeah,
So leave it up to the states. If Nebraska wants to sit up there and say you can't have an abortion ever, all right, and New York wants to say you can have an abortion until 15 seconds before the baby is birthed, that's leave it up to them.
yeah.
All right, they can make their own freaking decisions. We all can sit up there and walk and chew gum at the same time. It works. Trust me.
Well, I don't know. In the case of New York, that's questionable because they're over there like California.
Well, it still comes down to the problem that I have with the whole abortion discussion is it never comes. People try to avoid the, the, the gorilla in the room. When does human life begin?
Yeah.
All right.
Well, I mean, my
And
whole
that
thing is
should be left,
regardless of when
and that should be left to the
it
legislature.
should be. It should be, but it to me it's my stance is never going to waver on this. Okay? 12 weeks
As
is
wrong as it
enough
is.
time for a woman to discover that they're pregnant. Right. I mean, 12 weeks is long enough to discover that a woman to discover that she's pregnant and decide whether or not she wants to keep the kid. Okay? Now, it should be legal up until 12 weeks, or because there's always ors, if the mother's life is threatened, if she was raped, or in a case of incest. That covers everything. Now, some of these states are like, well, after 6 weeks you can't have an abortion. 6 weeks is not enough time for a woman to discover that she's pregnant
Yeah, but
and what to do with the
when
baby.
does human life begin? If you believe that human life begins at conception, all right, that's how you define
Mm,
it. I have no problem with that because that at least is a landmark demarcation point. Okay,
mm,
I'm not saying what my personal stance is as to what I'll agree with. Okay, because that's something else. I know that my stance is not a popular one. Okay, and that we still have to come as to a consensus. But that consensus has to be. I don't want to be the judge making that rule. It's got to be a consensus for the society to make that rule. It cannot be
yeah,
judges. It can't, and that's where the problem is with it. Is people forget,
yeah,
hey, there's a lot of things that people do in this country that I dislike, but I also
hmm,
know I'm not the judge, and I shouldn't be. Okay,
yeah,
you've got to give people the abilities to make and iron out these differences. Right. My stance is based on my how I see my principles. Okay. Do I
yeah.
think that other people like you, Maddie, are unprincipled loons? Yeah, well, sometimes, but that's a separate issue. It's a separate issue entirely, and it could all just be because, well, I'm a judgmental asshole that it shouldn't be allowed to exist. I mean, that's just the way it is. All right, I can see all sides of this story. So let's get to the next story, shall we?
Mhm.
Sitting empty, vast expanse of federal land eyed for new housing. Imagine having a country where over 90% of the land can't have housing, all because it's federally managed, said Representative John Curtis. The White House
So,
and
fuck
the
national
Republican
forest?
and the Republican National Committee agree on one thing at least, that the sale of surplus federal land could alleviate a crushing shortage of affordable housing. Wait a minute. Let's read this again. Surplus federal land. How do you define surplus federal land?
Mm-hmm.
Can, can somebody please outline this? Go ahead. Go ahead, Maddie.
They keep coming up with
I
these
broke
terms.
her.
I swear to fucking God. I really just, who comes up with these fucking terms? Like, surplus federal, so, fuck national forest preservation. So and so needs a house. No, there are lots of empty houses. There are lots of houses sitting empty. Okay, fine. They're not affordable. Whose fucking fault is that?
I guarantee you there's a lot of empty houses sitting that are quite affordable sitting right there in Michigan or in Detroit. You may not want to live there.
Look, I'm sitting here and I live in Minnesota with my mom. The first time I saw this, I had to ask my mom what the hell was going on, because you can literally drive down a street where there is a subdivision. You see sliding glass doors on the back of a house that lead to nowhere. I had to ask mom. I said, "Mom, are those sliding glass doors?" She goes, "Yes. It's a $350 to $500,000 home, and they charge you extra for the deck." So the house don't come with a deck. No, the house doesn't come with a deck. That's extra. Then why the fuck put the sliding glass door? Mom goes, "Don't ask me. I don't know." I, you know, for, I really don't get this. The
Pro-
whole housing thing is screwed up. It's
proposals
just really fucking screwed up.
Proposals to sell federal land to builders for the construction of homes remarkably made their way into both the RNC's 2024 platform and President Joe Biden's latest housing plan.
Our senile senior in chief.
Oh my God! As both parties struggle to reckon with voter dissatisfaction over the soaring cost of the nation's limited supply. It's simple in theory. The federal government, which owns roughly 28% of all the land in the United States, would open up bidding for parcels to developers who commit to keeping certain percentage of the units at an affordable level for the local population.
In other words, income or rent controlled housing.
And so you're going to put who in there? Who's going to be in these areas? Maddie, no, I will admit I've got to back off of this because I'll just go by yours because my opinion of this is just ridiculous.
It
The
is.
federal
It's fucking
land
ridiculous.
abuts up to cities in like state parks and national forests and things like that, like you were saying,
Hmm.
right?
Yep. Yep.
Can you tell me what the houses are like that abut those national forests?
Yeah.
Are
I mean,
they
it's just
are they like you know hotel condos or are they like I don't know rich resorts?
right. What kills me is okay. You've read the article already. To me, what I heard about keeping the prices down is my brain immediately went to rent controlled or mortgage controlled housing. Now, both of those terms, when people hear those terms, what's the first thing that pops into your head?
Harlem.
Or Compton, or, what people would call the hood.
Yes.
Okay. It's, people were bitching about, and yeah, and I've complained about the rent spike too over here in Minnesota because, and all across the US. But it happened because of the COVID bullshit.
Well,
This is
okay,
what
okay.
people are thinking.
It
The reason
happened.
stuff is out of control price wise is because when you put a moratorium and you go, okay, well, if they can't pay their rent, you can't kick them out. You still have landlords, whether it's in the housing development or an
Yeah.
apartment, writing down the months that they didn't get rent, so they have to recoup it somehow.
Yes. Now I will say this.
Oh,
Okay. The
okay,
problem with that wasn't that specific policy, but the fact that they didn't put it correctly. They didn't write it correctly. Okay, what they should have done during the COVID lockdown, because they were telling everybody how dangerous COVID was, and everybody knew that we were going to shut everything down. If you're really serious about this, then what you should have done is you should have sat up there and said, okay, for this, well, during this lockdown, the banks are not going to be able to charge any extra. They cannot demand any payments, and they cannot increase. All right, any of your principal. All right. So in other words,
right,
that's now I realize that that would have uh, negatively affected banks. I do realize that banks would have suffered under that system. All right. But the banks were
mm,
supposed to be able to absorb that kind of shock. Number one, and two, they were
yeah,
better placed to absorb that kind of shock than every other system every other economic area within the United States. So
yeah,
you basically said, look, if you are, let's say you got a mortgage, right? If you can't go work to go pay your mortgage, then what everything should be frozen exactly where it is until we have lifted the ban to let you go back to work. That's what they
right,
should have done. That would have helped people, and
yeah,
it would not have buried these people who were the renters, all right, and it wouldn't have buried the rentees.
right,
No one would have been worse off as a result. All right, with the
Right.
exception, of course, in the revenue streams into the banks. The banking would have taken a hit. I understand that. But
Yeah.
the system is supposed to be able to handle those kinds of shocks. That's why they went through that whole freaking rigmarole about making sure, oh, we got to consolidate all these things to make sure banks are means tested. Remember that?
Yep.
So
Mhm.
what the hell? It's not that you know COVID was the was something that hit us, right? Now we all know what the result was and what the reality of COVID
Yeah.
is. Okay, but whether it was COVID or some other kind of natural disaster kind of situation, okay, this could have been handled by the government so much better. Yet the one group who's most able to handle the kind of downturn was the one group that didn't have to suffer at all.
Yeah. Well, I
Because,
mean, when was the last time the government did anything right or efficient, for that matter?
well,
You're talking about the government.
well, not just the government, but also the banks. I'm
Mm.
death on these big banks. I really am, because the banking system in the country. Look, I understand everyone talks about the 40s and what happened in the 40s and so forth. All right, the 40s happened because people speculated. Right, the 30s. Well, I should say the
Yep.
30s and the late 20s, early 30s. Right, the global downturn. All right, was exacerbated in America because of Wall Street. Now it's interesting because I have a friend of mine who's a colleague that I work with, and he actually came to the United States via Australia. All right, but prior to that, he was born in Chile, so he kind of took a roundabout way of getting to America. Right. Now he more or less grew up in Australia, right? So 'cause he moved there when he
Uh-huh.
was, his family moved there when they were very, very young. All right, so he has some interesting outlooks on things, right? And he started looking up when I was talking about the Wall Street crash and everything. I said what you had was mass speculation, and he really started. He goes, let me go take a look at this, and he was shocked about what he found there. What they were doing is basically they were buying on margin, where they only had to sit up there and pony up 10% of the capital.
Mhm.
Right, which is what was happening for those who don't know. People were
Yeah.
basically buying on margin. You were basically taking out a loan, saying you're going to pay back the loan at the end of the day. All right. So if the stock
Yeah.
goes up, all right, instead of having one share of the stock, you had 10 shares of the stock. Okay. So when the stock
Yeah.
goes up, you can make a lot of money doing that. Right. But what happens when the stock
Mhm.
crashes and you only have
Yep.
enough money for one share?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, then all that other money
Yep.
is
I
gone.
hate I
But
hate to do this to you, but I gotta go get on the heating pad, dude.
yeah, well, I understand. So I'll let you go, Maddie. Thanks for coming. I can take it from here.
Mhm.
Talk to you later.
All right. Take care. Bye bye.
Bye
Bye,
bye.
everybody.
All right, let's get on to the next story. Impending doom. Doom. Chilling omens. Ancient pyramid collapse in Mexico. A supernatural sign of impending doom. All right. Warns descendants of the tribe who built it. The Aztecs. A Mexican pyramid used by an ancient tribe for human sacrifices is caved in a an in a supernatural sign of impending doom. Ah, my goodness. Descendants of the indigenous tribe who built it fear a huge natural disaster is about to hit after devastating storms ravaged one of two twin pyramids. These The pictures show the structure has partially collapsed after heavy downpours on July 30th washed away one side. The pyramids were built by the ancestors of the modern Puracupa people, a bloodthirsty tribe that defeated the Aztecs. Historians say that the Puracupa tribe used the Yakata pyramids for human sacrifices, all right, to their most important god, Kirikawiri. See, this is where I needed Maddie. You better be at the worst time. The Yakata pyramids are found in an archaeological site in the Izhulatsuyo, all right, in the Michoacan state. I'm not trying to butcher these names, I just cannot pronounce them. Before the arrival of the conquistadors, something similar happened for which the Pura Kapakio worldview of that time was because the gods Nanu Kurapukapuri and Kiru Kuriri were displeased. The Pura Kupaka, whatever, all right, defeated the Aztecs and ruled for 400 years before the Spanish invasion in 1519. So we're all doomed. Doom! National disaster. Doom! Meanwhile, over in Japan, summer holiday in full swing amid megaquake caution. Japan's summer holiday season moved into full swing on Saturday as people heading to their hometowns crowded railway stations and airports amid caution following a weather agency's advisory over a potential megaquake. It's my first visit to my hometown in 5 years after a hiatus due to the coronavirus. Now it is an earthquake, said Tomohiro Ogawa, all right, 49, a resident of the Chiba prefecture, said at the packed JR Tokyo station, adding that he has discussed preparing for a disaster following the alert with his family. On Thursday, the Japan Meteorological Agency issued its first ever advisory of a potential megaquake in the Nankai Trough, which runs along the Pacific coast just hours after a magnitude 7.1 quake struck southwestern Japan with its epicenter in the waters off the Miyazaki prefecture near the western edge of the trough. Although the Tokido Tokai I'm not going to put it. Bullet train ran at reduced speeds in one section of central Japan, causing delays of around 20 minutes. Reserved seats for services departing Tokyo were mostly sold out through Saturday. Sounds like the Japanese are like, okay, it's going to be a mega quake, but there's not much we can do about it, so we'll just have to survive. Makes sense. Makes sense. Let's guess this is from Florida. Never hide your bag of drugs in a bag labeled bag of drugs. Hi, Sherardi. If you would prefer the police not to find your bag of drugs, perhaps consider placing the illegal narcotics into something other than a container marked bag of drugs. Cops report that Lauren Riley was a passenger in a car pulled over Saturday morning after the driver was spotted without a seatbelt. During the traffic stop, officers noticed Riley, 41, moving items around in the vehicle's floorboards. When the police peered into the auto, they allegedly spotted drug paraphernalia, which prompted a probable cause examination of the vehicle and its contents. The resulting search, cops report, turned out a bag inside Riley's purse labeled bag of drugs. Inside the bag, cops alleged, was a needle, straws, a metal spoon, 4 glass pipes, and a plastic baggies with white colored residue. A bag inside the drugs bag contained crack cocaine, powdered cocaine, crystal meth, Xanax pills, and other narcotics. The discovery of the bag of drugs resulted in Riley's arrest on a variety of felony charges and a misdemeanor paraphernalia count. Riley, seen above, is being held in a Florida county lockup. Her bag of drugs is being held in a police evidence locker. Oh my god. Lady, you're a nit. You're a nitwit. Library girl just got booked on felony drug rap in Texas. Library girl just got booked. Kendra Sunderland, whose solo exploits at the Oregon State University Library helped launch her porn career, was arrested last week on felony drug charges in Texas, records show. Sunderland, 29, was busted Thursday afternoon while driving on Interstate 45 in Willis, a city about 50 miles north of Houston. Sunderland was behind the wheel of a 2013 Lexus pulled over by a Montgomery County Sheriff's Office deputy. According to a redacted incident report, Sunderland was nabbed for possession of a controlled substance, which was apparently marijuana. She was booked into the county jail, from which she was subsequently released. Sunderland, who is listed in police records as a Las Vegas resident, is pictured in the adjacent mugshot. Sunderland shot to fame in 2015 after filming a 31-minute webcam performance inside the OSU's Valley Library. The video, which found its way to the internet, showed Sunderland exposing her breasts and vagina, masturbating, and licking herself. Charged with public indecency, Sunderland copped to a misdemeanor count and was fined $1,000. Over the following years, Sunderland's adult film career has blossomed and her social media accounts exploded with over 800,000 Instagram followers and 1.1 million followers on Twitter. Sunderland even has a signature model, fleshlight. I don't know what that. I don't know. Don't care. All right. In a recent Instagram post, Sunderland noted the 9th anniversary of the Library Girl video. All right, the day my life changed forever. Thank you to everyone who participated in getting me this far. I love you all, and I'm sure she does. I am sure that she
This
does.
is pretty wild. So take a look. These are.
And we are going to go to this next story. This is water buffaloes, right? Roaming the streets, right? In Nashville, Tennessee. What water buffalo, not the water buffalo. Now, water buffalo can be, quite dangerous when they're startled. You don't see these things. They're not native to America, folks. These are not native to America, and they're running mass. What it was is a guy who's a farmer, basically had these water buffalo escape. Now, how did they escape his farm? Somebody left the fence open. They had left the gate open, and Bessie wandered on out. Now, these things, like I said, these things are huge, and they can be, if they're startled, they're generally docile. They're not Cape buffalo, right? They're not the wildebeest, right? So they're generally fairly docile, but still, trying to wrangle them back onto the farm, that must have been something freaking. Do they taste good? Cut right to the chase, dude. I assume actually that they probably do. Final story, though. Final story: alligator spotted in Lake Erie. Authorities and animal rescuers in Pennsylvania are on the hunt for an alligator caught on camera taking a swim in Lake Erie. A video posted to Facebook by Stina Roach shows what she estimated to be a 4 to 5 foot alligator swimming in the lake. Let's go ahead and take a quick Lake Erie. Take a quick look at the Lake Erie monster. Now, Lake Erie does border one small alligator. Does taste good. Let's see the freaking critter. I don't care about the person. Let's see the critter swimming. Yeah, that's an alligator. that is a gator. I gotta admit it. It's a gator. What it was doing there, I don't know. Please do not enter the water. There's been a report of an alligator. Look, a 5-foot alligator is not going to bother a human being, right? Generally, you have to. You're basically going to have to sit up there and do something else to get involved. So, but it is interesting. It's running around in Lake Erie and they haven't found it yet. you would think that they'd be able to find this gator. Now, Lake Erie is not one of the warmest lakes in the world, so the alligator is not going to survive long if it has to winter over in there. In the summertime, it might survive, but not in the winter. You just have to put them on the grill. I mean, look, if you've got a gator, how did the gator get away? Somebody's gator probably got too big and they just let it go. Could be that it escaped from a zoo. Who knows? But Lake Erie? Really? Really? All right, everybody. That's all I've got for today. I appreciate you all coming out. Hope you all have a good day. And I will talk at you all later. Thanks for coming out, everybody. Bye-bye.